Welcome to the Bite-Sized Tech News TLDR Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
If you are joining us today, you already know the mission of this show. We take the most complex, the most wild, and the fiercely debated developments in the tech world, and we extract the absolute bottom line for you.
Exactly, getting right to the facts.
We're digging through the white papers, the engineering readouts, the financial disclosures to figure out exactly what's happening at the bleeding edge, and more importantly, what it means for your immediate future, your security, and your productivity.
And we're skipping the slow ramp up today.
Oh yeah, we are moving at literal rocket speed. The topic we are unpacking today sounds, honestly, on the surface, it sounds like it was ripped straight out of a golden age science fiction novel.
It really does.
But looking at the source material we've gathered, it's very real. It's heavily funded, and it's being aggressively planned right now.
Right now.
We are talking about Elon Musk's incredibly ambitious blueprint to build a fully autonomous AI factory. Not in Silicon Valley, not in the Texas desert, but on the actual surface of the moon.
And, we really need to establish the stakes for you right out of the gate here. Because it's incredibly easy to dismiss a headline like that as just a whimsical sci-fi fantasy.
It's another billionaire's vanity project, right?
Exactly. But when you look at the underlying physics, the logistics, the geopolitical maneuvering detailed in these sources, a very different picture emerges.
It's a wake-up call.
It is. This is the absolute bleeding edge of the global race for AI supremacy. The outcome of this specific off-world expansion is going to dictate the fundamental security of our global data infrastructure.
Which impacts everyone listening.
Completely. It is going to define the absolute upper limits of the computational tools that every major industry will rely on in the very near future.
So if you think the large language models or the predictive algorithms you use at work today are powerful,
you have to understand the physical terrestrial infrastructure limitations that are holding them back right now, and why moving off-planet is suddenly being viewed not just as a cool option, but as a hard engineering necessity.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because going from, we have incredibly smart chatbots on our phones, to we need to build autonomous robotic manufacturing plants on the lunar surface to keep advancing, is a massive conceptual leap.
It's a huge jump.
But we're going to break it all down. Our roadmap for this deep dive is going to take us through the actual physical mechanics of this proposed lunar factory and the necessity of what the sources call the computational edge.
Right.
Then we'll address the massive elephant in the room, the sudden logistical pivot. Musk has been beating the Mars drum for 2 decades, so why the sudden obsession with the moon?
That's a fascinating shift.
Then we're going to follow the money, specifically looking at how U.S. taxpayer dollars are subsidizing this vision. And finally, we will look at the impending legal collision over space law and who actually owns the lunar resources.
It's a massive scope, but it all begins with this master plan for Musk's XAI company that's outlined in our sources. On paper, it's a shockingly simple 3-step blueprint. Step 1. Build a high-tech, fully autonomous manufacturing plant on the lunar surface.
Okay. Step 2. Use that factory to churn out advanced AI-powered satellites.
Right.
And step 3. Launch those newly built satellites into lunar orbit and beyond using a giant electromagnetic catapult.
It just sounds absurd when you list it out like that. Step 1, build a lunar factory. Step 2, make satellites. Step 3, fling them into space with magnets.
It sounds like a cartoon.
But the source material makes it clear that every single one of those steps is rooted in solving a very real, very terrestrial bottleneck. And that brings us to this phrase that keeps popping up, the computational edge.
Right, the computational edge.
How do we explain this constraint to someone who isn't a server architect? Because it seems like the entire physical foundation of this multi-billion-dollar project rests on this one concept.
Well, to understand why any rational business entity would go to the extreme lengths of building heavy industry on a barren rock 238,000 miles away, you really have to look at the physical constraints of Earth.
Right now, the race for artificial general intelligence is not just a software problem anymore. It's not just about writing more efficient code.
Or designing better neural networks.
Exactly. It is fundamentally a race for raw electricity and physical space.
Which we see already, right? We see tech giants fighting over water rights for cooling towers in Arizona, or buying up massive tracts of land for server farms.
Yes. And to put this computational edge into perspective, imagine you're trying to run a massive state-of-the-art manufacturing plant. You've got miles of heavy conveyor belts, thousands of robotic arms, massive smelting furnaces running at thousands of degrees.
A huge operation.
Massive. But by some bizarre zoning law, you are forced to power this entire colossal operation by plugging it into a single standard wall outlet in a residential home.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The moment you flip the switch, you blow the breaker.
Right, instantly.
The machinery cannot run because the underlying infrastructure simply cannot provide the sheer volume of energy required. That residential wall outlet, that is Earth's current power grid.
And the massive manufacturing plant is the next generation of AI.
Exactly. We are rapidly approaching a hard physical limit where the energy grid of our planet and honestly the physical footprint required to manage the thermal output of the servers simply cannot support the level of compute needed to achieve the next major leaps.
So moving to the moon is the equivalent of deciding you are done messing around with the residential wall outlet, and instead you're just going to build a dedicated, limitless nuclear power plant exclusively for your own factory.
Precisely. You remove the bottleneck entirely. You're bypassing the terrestrial grid, the environmental regulations, the geographic constraints, and the thermal management issues of Earth.
But wait, let's talk about those thermal management issues, because that's a huge point of friction here. If you're building a server farm on the moon to generate this edge, you are operating in a vacuum.
Yes, you are.
I think a lot of people assume space is just uniformly freezing cold, so cooling servers would be easy. But a vacuum is an insulator, right?
It's the ultimate insulator.
Like a high-end thermos uses a vacuum to keep your coffee hot because there are no air molecules to transfer the heat away.
Right.
So if you have a massive AI server farm generating intense heat on the moon, how on Earth, or rather, how on the moon do you cool it without an atmosphere?
That is a brilliant point of friction, and it's one of the core engineering challenges the source material hints at. You're absolutely right. You can't use traditional forced air cooling.
Or water evaporative cooling towers like they do down in Texas.
Exactly. In a vacuum, the only way to shed heat is through radiative cooling. You literally have to radiate the thermal energy away as infrared light.
Which means what, physically?
It means a lunar compute facility would require massive, specialized radiator panels stretching for kilometers, strategically shielded from the sun, just to bleed the heat of the processors out into the blackness of space. It requires a complete reimagining of computer hardware architecture.
Which perfectly illustrates the sheer scale of what they're trying to build. And the source actually gives us a specific number to illustrate that scale. Musk is aiming for an off-world infrastructure capable of generating 100 terawatts of AI compute every single year.
It's a staggering number.
100 terawatts. Let's really drill down into that because it's hard to conceptualize.
It's almost impossible to conceptualize without context. To put 100 terawatts into perspective, we have to look at humanity's current global energy consumption.
Yeah.
The entire planet Earth, every major city, every industrial plant, every cargo ship, every car, every smartphone, every single human activity combined operates on a continuous power draw of roughly 18 to 20 terawatts.
Okay, let me stop you right there. The entire human race uses 20 terawatts, and the proposed lunar factory is aiming for 100 terawatts.
Yes. Musk is talking about an AI compute infrastructure that would require roughly 5 times the energy consumption of the entire human race.
That is insane.
And dedicating all of it solely to artificial intelligence. It would completely blow away anything we have here on Earth. As the source material notes, this scale of compute is designed to achieve an intelligence so massive, so incomprehensibly powerful, that we, to quote the text, can't even imagine what it would think about.
Because you literally cannot build a 100 terawatt server farm anywhere on Earth.
You would boil rivers trying to cool it. You'd exhaust the power grids of entire continents. You can only build it off-world, utilizing uninterrupted solar arrays spanning massive stretches of the lunar surface and immense radiative cooling systems.
You know, the factory builds the hardware, the massive solar arrays power the 100 terawatt compute, and then we have step 3, the electromagnetic catapult.
Right.
And this is where the physics of the moon actually become a massive advantage, right?
Yeah.
Because the moon has only 1/6 of Earth's gravity and no atmosphere to create drag.
What's fascinating here is how the environment dictates the technology. If you want to launch a satellite from Earth, you need a massive controlled chemical explosion.
A traditional rocket.
You need a rocket filled with hundreds of tons of highly volatile propellant just to fight through the thick atmosphere and the heavy gravity well. It's incredibly inefficient. Most of the rocket's mass is just fuel used to lift the rest of the fuel.
Right.
But on the moon, because of the low gravity and the vacuum, you don't need chemical rockets to achieve orbit. You can use an electromagnetic catapult, also known as a mass driver.
It's essentially a giant railgun or like a maglev train track aimed at the sky.
Exactly. You use powerful linear electric motors to accelerate a payload along a track until it reaches escape velocity, and you just fling it into space.
And you can't do that here.
You can't do this on Earth because if you accelerated a payload to orbital speeds at sea level, the friction of the dense atmosphere would incinerate it instantly. It would burn up like a meteor in reverse.
Wow. But on the moon?
On the moon, there's no air resistance. You just spin it up and let it go. It allows for an incredibly cheap, highly repetitive, continuous launch cadence for building massive orbital infrastructure.
So what does this all mean for the listener? We aren't just talking about cool science experiments here. What is the actual, tangible bottom line for any professional paying attention to the tech sector right now?
If we connect this to the broader picture of technological dominance, the impact really comes down to two things: absolute market productivity and a totally new paradigm for security.
Let's look at the productivity aspect first.
Whoever achieves this off-planet computational edge is going to dictate the future of the global market. Full stop. If one entity, whether it's XAI or a coalition of companies, has access to 100 terawatts of off-world compute, the enterprise tools, the predictive algorithms, the automated systems they can offer will be light years ahead of anything built on terrestrial servers.
It creates an insurmountable moat.
It creates a monopoly based on physics. If an industry relies on AI trained on a terrestrial grid and their competitor leverages an AI trained on a 100 terawatt lunar plant, the terrestrial company will be fundamentally obsolete. You will not be able to catch up using earthbound infrastructure.
And what about the security aspect? Because frankly, putting our most critical advanced data infrastructure in space sounds simultaneously like the ultimate secure vault and a terrifying vulnerability.
It shifts the entire concept of data sovereignty. Right now, our most critical terrestrial server farms are highly vulnerable. They're vulnerable to natural disasters, to catastrophic power grid failures, to political instability, direct physical sabotage.
All very real threats today.
Very real. If your foundational AI models and data are processed and stored in an off-world orbital network fed by a lunar factory, they are physically removed from terrestrial threats. They exist in a completely different jurisdictional and physical reality.
That changes everything.
It means that anyone involved in strategic planning, global logistics, or high-level tech investment needs to start wrapping their head around the idea that the hardware running the global economy might soon reside on a different celestial body.
Which brings up a massive, glaring contradiction that we have to address. This 10-year timeline for a lunar factory is mind-blowing. But it brings up a huge elephant in the room: what happened to Mars.
Ah, yes.
If you followed Elon Musk's career, his public statements, his company mission statements for the last 2 decades, it has always been Mars. The stated goal of SpaceX has always been making humanity multiplanetary. That meant the red planet.
Always.
In fact, the source material points out a highly revealing quote. Just a little over a year ago, Musk explicitly called the moon a distraction. He viewed any lunar missions as a detour from the real ultimate goal of colonizing Mars.
This raises an important question about how visionary goals interact with brutal engineering truths. To go from publicly labeling the moon a distraction to suddenly stating that it will be the site of your most critical, defining infrastructure is a staggering pivot.
It's a 180.
But what's fascinating here is that this shift is not a change in the ultimate philosophy. The source notes that the overarching goal is still extending consciousness. But the pivot to the moon is a pragmatic, highly calculated shift based entirely on the unforgiving mathematics of space logistics.
Let's look at those logistics. Because the contrast between a Mars mission and a moon mission is stark. And I want to play devil's advocate here for a second. If the goal is a secure off-world location, Mars has an atmosphere, albeit a thin one.
True.
It has massive reserves of water ice. It has a day-night cycle similar to Earth. Why abandon that for a barren, airless rock with 2-week-long nights?
Because of the orbital mechanics and the feedback loop of development. If you want to go to Mars, you are dealing with a launch window dictated by the synodic period of the two planets.
Right.
Because Earth and Mars orbit the Sun at different speeds, they only align favorably for a journey roughly every 26 months. And when they do align, you are still looking at a transit time of about 6 months through deep space.
So if you launch a rocket to Mars, it takes half a year to get there. And if you realize you made a mistake in the design, or if the rocket explodes on the launch pad, You can't just try again next week.
No.
You have to wait over 2 years for the planets to align again just to send the replacement parts.
Exactly. Now, contrast that brutal reality with the moon. The moon is tightly gravitationally bound to Earth. It's a mere 2 to 3 day journey. And the launch window. Because of that tight orbit, a new, highly efficient launch window opens almost every 10 days.
Every 10 days compared to 26 months.
You don't have to wait for a rare planetary alignment. You just wait a week and a half.
And this is where the Silicon Valley tech industry mentality completely collides with and overtakes the traditional aerospace mentality. In the tech industry, in software development, and especially in AI development, rapid iteration is everything.
It's the whole model.
The entire methodology is built on agile development.
Yeah.
You build a prototype, you test it, it inevitably breaks, you analyze the failure, you fix the code, and you test it again immediately. You need tight, rapid feedback loops.
Yes.
If your feedback loop is 26 months long just to get the hardware to the testing site, your project will stagnate.
That is the crux of the pivot. Waiting 26 months to test a new iteration of a robotic factory component for Mars is a death sentence in the incredibly fast-paced race for AI supremacy. By the time your automated mining hardware reaches Mars, the AI software back on Earth has already evolved 3 generations past what that hardware was designed to support.
Wow.
The hardware is obsolete before it even enters the Martian atmosphere.
But wait, even with a 10-day launch window, landing heavy machinery on the moon is notoriously difficult. We've seen multiple lunar landers from various countries crash in just the last few years.
Lots of them.
You don't have an atmosphere to use parachutes or aerobraking.
Yeah.
It is entirely propulsive landing. Isn't the failure rate going to be astronomical, making this just as slow and expensive as Mars?
That is exactly the friction point, and precisely why the agile iteration cadence is so absolutely necessary. Yes, landing heavy payloads on the moon is incredibly difficult. You are going to crash. You are going to lose payloads.
Right.
But with a 10-day launch cadence, a crash is data, not a disaster. If a Starship crashes on the lunar surface while trying to deliver a massive robotic arm for the factory, you immediately download the telemetry, figure out what went wrong with the propulsive descent, adjust the engineering, build a new one, and you launch it again 10 days later.
Which you simply cannot do with Mars.
You cannot do that with Mars. That kind of speed means you can develop, test, break, and refine complex off-world manufacturing processes exponentially faster.
And the timeline benefits detailed in the sources are what completely changed the game for anyone analyzing this from a strategic perspective. Because of this rapid iteration capability, the source material projects that we're looking at a potential lunar city, or at least a fully functional, highly active autonomous industrial base in less than 10 years.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this timeline shift is monumental. Moving from a 20-plus year speculative Mars timeline down to a sub-10-year lunar timeline takes this entire concept out of the realm of abstract futurism and places it squarely onto the desks of current strategic planners.
It makes it real.
10 years is within the current career lifespan of almost everyone listening to this.
It's not our grandkids' problem. It's our problem right now.
Precisely. It means that corporate strategists, supply chain analysts, and institutional tech investors need to internalize that this off-world supply chain and testing ground is likely to materialize within the next decade. It is going to drastically accelerate the pace of AI hardware deployment.
Yeah, let's plan for it.
You cannot responsibly plan a company's 10-year technological or infrastructural roadmap without factoring in the very real possibility that the absolute peak of computational power, the true computational edge, will be controlled by an off-world monopoly utilizing resources that we do not have access to on Earth.
Which brings us to a massive, heavily subsidized point, because talking about the philosophical goals of extending consciousness is inspiring. Breaking down the orbital mechanics of a 10-day launch window is fascinating. But none of that matters. None of those rockets leave the launch pad if the economics don't work. The financial reality check here reveals that this isn't just Elon Musk emptying his personal bank accounts to build a moon base. U.S. taxpayer money is deeply, intricately, and directly involved.
You cannot build a heavy industrial space empire on vision alone. You require massive, sustained capital. And the business case for the moon, unlike the business case for Mars, is incredibly solid right now, and more importantly, it is currently flush with government cash.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
To understand this, we have to look closely at the NASA Artemis program.
The Artemis program is NASA's official initiative to return humans to the moon, establish a sustainable presence, and eventually prepare for Mars. But how does that directly fund an autonomous AI factory?
It comes down to the hardware contracts. SpaceX currently holds massive, multi-billion-dollar contracts with NASA under the Artemis program. The specific purpose of the primary contract is for NASA to use a modified version of SpaceX's Starship vehicle as the Human Landing System, or HLS, for the upcoming moon missions.
So NASA is paying SpaceX billions to figure out how to land Starship on the moon safely so astronauts can use it.
Exactly. But here is the critical overlap. Starship is the exact same super heavy lift rocket architecture that Musk requires to transport all the heavy machinery, the autonomous robots, the massive solar array components, and the radiative cooling systems needed to build his XAI factory.
Ah, I see. The research, the development, the trial and error, the explosive test flights over the Gulf of Mexico, the complex engineering required to transfer cryogenic propellants in orbit. A massive chunk of that foundational R&D is being heavily subsidized by U.S. taxpayers through the Artemis contracts.
That is the brilliant financial maneuver at play here. If Musk had stubbornly stuck to his timeline for Mars, he would have had to fund the entirety of that deep space heavy lift R&D largely on his own or through incredibly risky private venture capital. By pivoting to the moon, he perfectly aligns his ultimate goal of an off-world AI factory with the immediate, heavily funded geopolitical goals of the United States government. The R&D for his supply chain is subsidized. The risk is distributed. This completely de-risks the most expensive early stages of the factory development.
And it is not just government money driving this acceleration. The source material highlights another massive financial catalyst hovering on the horizon. A potential SpaceX initial public offering, or IPO, which analysts suggest could happen as soon as 2026.
If we look at how institutional Wall Street operates, pitching major investors on a 20-year, highly speculative, massively expensive mission to Mars is an incredibly tough sell.
Oh, definitely.
The return on investment is just too far out, the capital requirements are a black hole, and the risk of catastrophic failure is far too high for standard portfolios.
Right. A mutual fund doesn't want to explain to its clients that their money is tied up in a Martian colony that might collapse in 2045.
Exactly. However, pitching those same institutional investors on a 10-year, heavily NASA-subsidized lunar industrial park with clear, achievable, near-term milestones like the deployment of an AI satellite network, generating massive commercial revenue that is a massive selling point.
It changes everything.
The pivot to the moon changes the narrative from speculative exploration to B2B infrastructure development. An IPO centered around near-term lunar infrastructure, backed by government contracts and directly tied to the booming AI market, is infinitely more attractive to the public markets than a distant Martian dream.
So for the listener who is analyzing market trends, tracking where the smart money is moving, how does this heavily funded imminent commercial space push impact the broader tech sector?
It serves as absolute market validation. It validates space not merely as a theater for scientific curiosity or national prestige, but as the next major sector for core business infrastructure. When you have billions of government dollars and potentially trillions of public market dollars flowing into lunar development, it creates massive immediate ripples across the entire tech ecosystem.
Which means?
It fundamentally changes how tech companies evaluate future partnerships and supply chains. If you are a major enterprise software company today, you are suddenly looking at aerospace companies not as rocket builders, but as the future landlords of the ultimate computational platform.
Wow.
This validates massive secondary investments in advanced robotics, capable of operating in a vacuum, in extreme environment materials science, and in low-latency deep space communication protocols. The business case for the moon essentially creates an entirely new vertical in the global economy overnight.
Okay, so the technological vision is incredibly ambitious, but grounded in the reality of the computational edge. The logistical pivot to a 10-day agile testing cycle makes complete engineering sense. The taxpayer subsidies and Wall Street capital are lining up perfectly. It sounds like a runaway freight train of inevitable progress.
It does.
But as the source material points out, there's a massive wall standing directly on the tracks. And it is a multi-trillion-dollar legal wall.
This raises an important question and perhaps the most critical geopolitical question of the 21st century. How does humanity govern off-world expansion? Because right now, the legal framework is a massive, unresolved contradiction.
It's a mess.
We have two directly conflicting sets of laws governing what a nation or a private corporation can and cannot do in space, and they are headed for a spectacular collision.
Let's outline these two conflicting frameworks, just looking purely at the text and the history of the laws themselves. On one side, we have the granddaddy of all international space law, the 1967 Outer Space Treaty.
Right.
Now, context is everything here. This treaty was signed during the absolute height of the Cold War by the U.S., the Soviet Union, and eventually almost every recognized country on Earth. And its primary motivation was terror. Everyone was terrified of the other guy putting nuclear weapons in orbit or claiming the moon as a military base. So the treaty is super clear. It unequivocally states that space, including the moon and all other celestial bodies, is the province of all mankind. It explicitly bans any nation from claiming sovereignty or ownership over the moon, period. You cannot plant a flag, draw a border, and say, "This land is ours, keep out."
That is correct. The 1967 treaty essentially treats the moon as a global commons, very much like the legal frameworks governing the deep ocean floor or the continent of Antarctica. It belongs to everyone, and therefore it belongs to no one exclusively.
But then we have the other side of this.
Right. On the other side of this impending legal collision, you have a much more recent piece of domestic legislation, the 2015 U.S. Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act.
And this is where it gets incredibly sticky. Because this 2015 U.S. law basically states that American citizens and American corporations are legally allowed to own, possess, transport, use, and sell any resources they extract from an asteroid or a space resource.
And there is the fundamental friction point. The 1967 International Treaty says nobody owns the moon. The 2015 U.S. domestic law says American companies can pull resources out of the moon, claim ownership of those specific extracted resources, and sell them for profit.
I love the analogy from Professor Mary Jane Rubenstein that is highlighted in the source material because it perfectly crystallizes the absurdity of this legal gray area, is the floorboards and beams analogy.
It is a brilliant way to understand the legal gymnastics that are currently happening.
Right.
Professor Rubenstein explains that according to the 1967 treaty, you cannot own the house. The moon itself, the land, the territory, the craters, that is the house, and it belongs to all of humanity. No one can claim the deed to the property.
Right.
However, the 2015 U.S. law suggests that while you absolutely cannot own the house, you are perfectly within your legal rights to walk inside the house, rip up the floorboards, tear down the beams, carry them outside, and sell them for a profit.
Which is wild. How can you extract, modify, and own the component pieces of a thing without having some sort of territorial claim to the area where the thing resides?
It's a massive contradiction.
But I have to ask, why does this matter right now? This sounds like a fascinating debate for an international law seminar, but does it actually threaten the 10-year timeline of the AI factory?
It absolutely threatens it because Elon Musk desperately needs those floorboards and beams. You cannot build a massive autonomous AI factory, a 100 terawatt power grid spanning kilometers, and a gigantic electromagnetic catapult out of thin air.
No.
You cannot afford to launch all the raw steel and titanium required from Earth. It would bankrupt the project instantly. The entire premise relies on what is called in situ resource utilization.
Using the dirt and rocks already on the moon to build the infrastructure.
Exactly. You have to aggressively mine the lunar regolith. You have to strip mine the craters at the lunar poles to extract the ice for water, for cooling, and for breaking down into hydrogen and oxygen for fuel. You have to process millions of tons of lunar soil to extract the silicon for the solar panels and the metals to build the satellite chassis.
So the core legal question that must be answered before this factory can scale is, can a private corporation land on a highly desirable piece of lunar territory, say, the rim of a crater that has constant sunlight for power and deep ice reserves in the shadows, scoop up millions of tons of that lunar soil, permanently alter the landscape, refine it into titanium, build a massive factory, and generate trillions of dollars in AI compute value, all without technically owning the land they are occupying?
And if they do claim the right to extract those resources, what stops another nation, say, a state-backed corporation from China or India, from landing their own automated mining equipment right next to them or directly in front of them and extracting the exact same resources?
That's a great point.
If no one owns the land, how do you establish a zone of non-interference? If someone damages your solar array with flying debris from their landing zone, what court handles the dispute?
Because there is no space police. There is no lunar zoning board.
Precisely. And this is the profound implication of this legal collision for you, the listener. How this specific legal gray area is resolved over the next decade is not just going to dictate the fate of Musk's factory, it is going to define the entire legal framework for international resource extraction and property rights for the next chapter of human civilization.
That sounds like a recipe for intense geopolitical conflict.
It signals the dawn of an era of unprecedented regulatory battles and potential physical friction over off-planet resource security. If the United States vigorously protects the right of its domestic companies to extract and profit from lunar resources under the 2015 law, other spacefaring nations will undoubtedly assert their own competing frameworks. They will challenge the U.S. interpretation of the 1967 treaty. The fundamental rules of commerce, property rights, and resource security that have governed Earth for centuries are about to be stretched, broken, and rewritten in the vacuum of space. Understanding this impending legal shift is absolutely crucial for anyone involved in long-term global and now extra-global market strategy.
It is absolutely mind-blowing to think that we are talking about the literal foundations of a new off-world economy being built directly on top of a massive legal contradiction from the Cold War. But that is exactly what the source material is pointing toward.
It really is.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the intense physical constraints of the terrestrial power grid to the brutal logistics of interplanetary travel, all the way to the shifting interpretations of international space law. To make sure you walk away with the absolute most critical information, we're going to rapidly summarize the 3 essential takeaways you need to remember from this deep dive. Takeaway number 1, the race for the computational edge. The blueprint to build a lunar AI factory capable of generating 100 terawatts of compute, coupled with an electromagnetic catapult, is not a side project. It is the ultimate strategic move to achieve total off-world AI supremacy. It is a direct response to the hard engineering reality that Earth's current power grid and thermal management capabilities simply cannot support the massive energy requirements needed for the next leap in artificial intelligence.
And takeaway number 2, the pragmatic logistical pivot. The sudden, heavily documented shift from colonizing Mars to industrializing the Moon is driven purely by the necessity of speed. Mars requires a 6-month journey with a rigid 26-month wait between launch windows. The Moon requires a 2-day trip with a 10-day launch window. That tight lunar cadence allows for the rapid, relentless development, failure, and testing cycles necessary to win the tech race, pushing the realistic timeline for an off-world industrial base down to less than 10 years.
And takeaway number 3, the impending legal and financial collision. While the required heavy-lift rocket R&D is currently being heavily subsidized by U.S. taxpayers through NASA's Artemis program, and a potential 2026 SpaceX IPO makes the business case highly attractive to institutional investors, the entire endeavor faces a massive legal gray area. There is direct unresolved conflict between the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which declares no one can own the Moon, and a 2015 U.S. law that allows private companies to extract and profit from its resources. It is setting the stage for the ultimate geopolitical battle over who owns the floorboards of space.
Those are the core, unavoidable facts driving this incredible convergence of technology and geopolitics. And fully understanding these 3 points gives you a remarkably clear view of exactly where the future of global tech infrastructure is rapidly heading.
Absolutely. It changes how you view every headline about space, AI, and energy moving forward. And if you want to stay ahead of these incredibly fast-moving tech curves, make sure you check out the Tech News TLDR YouTube channel. They post daily, high-energy video updates breaking down exactly what you need to know about the bleeding edge of the tech industry, acting as a great companion to the deep dives we do here. You definitely do not want to miss it. But before we sign off today, we always want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own time.
We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing the Moon through a very specific, highly utilitarian lens. We've looked at it as a logistical puzzle to be solved, a financial opportunity to be capitalized on, and a legal battlefield to be navigated. We have talked about it as nothing more than a source of limitless solar power and raw, extractable materials for heavy industry. But if you connect this to the broader human experience, consider this. For the entirety of human history, across every single culture and civilization that has ever existed, the Moon has been a shared, untouched, universally revered symbol in the night sky. It has inspired our earliest art, guided our religions, and formed our very concept of time and tides. If we are rapidly entering an era where the Moon is legally and practically treated not as a shared, untouchable celestial body for humanity, but merely as a collection of floorboards and beams waiting to be stripped and extracted for corporate AI supremacy, how will that fundamentally alter humanity's relationship with the night sky? When you look up in 10 years and know that what you are seeing is a privately owned industrial complex generating terawatts of compute, How does that change who we are down here on Earth?
It definitely reframes the way you look at the sky. Something to think about the next time you step outside at night. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.